Roosmarie.
En de nieuwe link misschien in de comments van de oude link.
Okay, welcome at the first of 3 live streams hosted by Studio Jeffrey Heiligers. My name is Sebastiaan van den Venne. I run a studio called Draw Slow. I'm a lettering artist, but for today I will be your moderator. Over the last 10 months, Jeffrey has been working on 4 concepts, re-engineering home and lifestyle products to the new standard, matching with his vision for the year 2030. Before we dive into the collection, I would like first to ask our guests of today to introduce themselves. So Pepijn, let's start with you. Please unmute and introduce yourself.
Hi, good afternoon here in Amsterdam. I am Pepijn Duijvestein. I am director at a company called DDW'20 New Economy. Funny, we always say we're the doctor from the new economy. We identify the problems we have with current business models. That could be on the materials we are using, but that could also be on what kind of revenue model we have. So if it's not social, yes or no. And we redesign these business models within our vision of the new economy.
Thank you. Next up, Roosmarie, could you introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Roosmarie Ruigrok. I'm the owner and founder of Clean and Unique, a platform was established in 2007, and we help designers in the fashion industry to find and to connect with the right suppliers to make their business model more sustainable, ethical, and with new business models. And next to that, I'm involved in many projects around the world.
Thank you. Now we go towards Douwe.
Hi everybody, I'm Douwe Joustra, owner director of the company Implement Circular Economy, ICE Amsterdam, where I work already for 10 years on the implementation of circular economy in all different kind of businesses. And the last couple of years I've been working with the CNA Foundation on the implementation of circular economy in the fashion industry.
Thank you. We go towards Jessica.
Hello everybody, my name is Jessica Den Hartog. I'm a material designer and my studio is in Den Bosch. I make from plastic waste new materials or products together with the industry, but also with other designers to give a new vision on this material and to inspire a lot of people to use this material again.
Thank you. And last but not least, our host for today, Jeffrey, please introduce yourself.
My name is Jeffrey. I am re-engineer at Studio Jeffrey Heiligers, and well, together with businesses, I look at the materials, crafts, and technologies used to make products, and I try to re-engineer them to new standards.
Thank you all for the introduction. Before we open this discussion, I would like to move 10 years forward in time and read a little newspaper item that is trending topic today. So we're in the Netherlands, October 2030. Purchasing new products is no longer permitted. Adopting is. Retailers, manufacturers, and consumers are working hand in hand to bring the impact of lifestyle products down to zero. Adopters and producers take their own roles in this process and share responsibility. The individual story and created identity shown in the passport of each project reflects its entire life cycle, from ID to disposal. The right choice is the new standard for all parties. During the making process of flatpack couture and the DIY build-it-yourself sneaker, the consumer takes control. The designer, manufacturer, and retailer guarantee the zinc cabinet and the DIY sneaker are 100% circular. 30 kilograms of fast fashion waste from the year 2020 shape every hand-crushed Ruigrok. Low impact is now the new standard in manufacturing, where recycling is central to the design process. Disposing is simply out of fashion. What do you think? Should we buy or adapt. Reacting to the collection is allowed. So we have Jeffrey presenting his vision on this 2030 role of manufacturers and producers and designers. So I want to open up the floor, maybe start with Pepijn. Is there a first reaction? Should we buy or should we adopt?
Yes, I mean, we should adopt, of course, in the revenue model. That's an interesting philosophy, and I'm very glad it's already happening in different kind of sectors where people are being the owner of their own land and their own crops and their own vegetables. So that's great. So I do hope this vision is not there in 2030, but maybe in 2025, or we can start with adapting in 2021. The one thing I do think I would like to bring in for the discussion is you ended with a sentence about recycling. Could you say that again?
So we were saying low impact is the new standard in manufacturing, where recycling is central to the design process. Disposing is simply out of fashion.
I think that is one thing we should do, but also look at bio-based materials. There are a lot of materials we should not recycle anymore. So it's really depending on the recycling. So it should be a part of the design process. But for me, the core of a design process would be using renewable and materials that from the start are not polluting and store a lot of CO2.
Yeah, I totally agree on that, Pepijn. Today I post a jeans who was on landfill for 1 year, and the cotton was gone. Only the plastic inside of that jeans, well, because the jeans probably it was made of polyester cotton, and the polyester is still there. And lately I had also a discussion about how we can improve our message to the consumer. And then someone say, it's quite normal to me. Dig 2 holes in your garden, put in one hole only plastics, to put in another hole only organic materials. What do you think where the plants are growing the best on? And this was a good metaphor to realize what we are doing at the moment in textiles. Till a few years ago, 60% of the fashion who enter in the Dutch country, it maintains 60% of cotton and the rest of other materials. And it's switched in 1.5-2 years to 60% of polyesters. And I think that's a dramatic wave in the textile industry.
Douwe, can I ask you to react as well to the statement, should we buy or should we adopt? How do you feel about this?
Of course, I agree to that philosophy, though I don't really know whether we should use the word adopt or use or service or whatever, because that's one of the trending topics in circular economy is fashion as a service, which means that, almost everything through the whole chain will change. Because when you want to have fashion as a service, you need to have new and different business models in which more cooperative business models start to exist, because all participants in the chain are part of the creation of the service. And so also should be valued for creating that part of the service. So that goes from the farmer to the producer to the service provider, which would be nowadays the retail, but the retail will change into a service provider. The big question, of course, is do we connect to the needs and the hidden needs of the customer, the user? That's the big question in the end. And I think that if we are able to create a good offer that fits into the needs and the hidden needs of the customer, then they will follow. So don't wait for the request from the customer, but offer it and the customer will follow.
I think we have a nice tunnel already where we're heading towards. Jeffrey is proposing this more shared responsibility in this industry, as well as a creator, as a manufacturer, and also centering this around the user. So maybe let's switch to Jeffrey and maybe let him explore his vision a little bit of what he's proposing with this statement.
Yeah, the idea of it being forbidden to buy and having to adopt is more to make people a little bit more aware about the fact that they're taking something into the house and that they need to take care of it. I think we lost touch to the products that we have in our homes. I think we don't know how to fix them when they break. We don't know who made them. We don't know their footprint. We don't know anything about them. You just buy them off the shelf. And I really found it really interesting to look into the future where this is not an issue anymore, and where consuming can be something really easy, and you don't have to look into if it's a sustainable product, yes or no. It shouldn't even be a choice. It should just be the right choice. And that's why I was exploring that thing of shared responsibility, that we have to be more transparent. I think we're already working towards it. It's going quite slow. But with my collection, I really try to challenge myself to keep the lines really short and work with local producers, and also try to create products the wrong way around, I always say. So look at the end of life first, and then use that as a starting point of the design process. So what happens to the product when someone doesn't want it anymore? I think this also allows us as designers to be a bit more transparent about the products we bring into this world. So that's the products are on my website. I can go into detail about all of them, but I think that will take too much time. I've shared it with you guys already. Maybe one of the products that I can highlight is the zinc cabinet I did in collaboration with Ruigrok. And there we really focused on creating a wardrobe that is like the construction is supporting itself. It doesn't need any glue. It doesn't need any welding. There are no chemical substances used to make the wardrobe. And the idea is that when someone doesn't want to have the wardrobe anymore, let's say over 50 years, that Ruigrok can buy it back. And with only with only a few steps in recycling, it can just be thrown in the oven because it doesn't have any fixtures, and remelted into like a new sheet of zinc that can be used on roofing, for example, or cladding in buildings.
Yes, and this is where I'm going to tease you a little, Jeffrey. Sorry, because I looked in the 3 different things you created, and I do want to also make a beautiful remark about the flat pack couture. I cannot even pronounce it, but I think that philosophy is super interesting, where people make it at home themselves and know how to fix it. But the zinc closet, we don't have enough zinc on this world to give everybody a zinc closet. The energy needed to extract zinc of the earth, there's way more energy or polluting than a little glue or a little screw. So I think the philosophy is very well done, but the material that has been chosen, and we can say it's 100% recyclable, but it costs a lot of energy to bring zinc above 1,000 degrees to recycle it at the end. So I think the idea is beautiful, the philosophy is beautiful, but the material is, well, a very impactful material, which is also a material that's going to be maybe already is a conflict material. So zinc is not conflict free, and also a material that's going to be run out in 50 years if we're still using it on our buildings and different kind of other applications. And also, I think with this, zinc is way more precious material to do stuff that is way more technical, like a battery. and maybe wood or bio-based or other products can be a closet. Not to be unhappy about the closet, but a closet is not a very, how do you say it? It's a beautiful product, but it's not a very hard thing to do, to hold close, where zinc can be a beautiful material for different technologies.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. And first I want to say it is a concept, and it was more to show that it's possible to create a piece of furniture that doesn't rely on any fixtures. But yeah, definitely. I mean, this was an opportunity that I took, and I made the wardrobe, and it was nice to explore this topic. And I think it's just the starting point of something really interesting, and it doesn't necessarily need to be out of zinc. It could also be a different material. It is just to like all of the concepts that I thrown into the world during the Dutch Design Week now, to show that there are options that that make this possible.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah,
I
let's.
am well. Oh,
Sorry. Now you go.
okay. I'm wondering, Roosmarie, how do you look at a collection of Jeffrey with the flatback couture? How do you see this in the fashion world?
Yeah, then completely the mindset of consumers has to be changed. And I think that only the industry can change the vision of consumers, because how is possible, that's my question always, where we are now, so that we need every Friday a new cloth to go to a party or something. Why it's not done when you have for the third time your dress. So in the moment that Jeffrey and we met each other, it was during a talk at Flash and Clash in Maastricht, and I was wearing a dress, and I bought it when I was 28, and I still have it, and I still wearing it. So it's a black dress. Everyone is wearing black. So for me, to have so much clothes in your closet is really useless. Even research found it out. And I think that we have a capsule collection, like they say in the fashion industry, and that we have to learn that we can combine a lot of clothes. So you don't need so much. I understand that this is not a good message for the retailers, especially not for the ones who are the fast fashion retailers. So what do we have to do with these big buildings in the city? So I think we have really to redesign completely the atmosphere in the city, the streets in the city. You can see now I live also in Amsterdam. During COVID, Amsterdam, the city center was completely empty, and the little shops around in the city, in Amsterdam West, in the East, and those shops, they were doing very well when they reopened. And especially also the people who had really a beautiful story. So I know a lot of fashion designers, they have a small shop, and consumers, they entered also in these shops. And I don't know, also by the libraries, now libraries popping up as well. So to share the clothes, and there are only a few products who wants to be shared. For example, a woman don't want to share a trouser. For a man, it's not a problem, but for a woman, it's a. So we have really to investigate.
Well, I think it depends on the man, but.
But I know that especially I worked for a long time also in the corporate clothing industry. And when you look at the corporate clothing industry, you share your clothes as well, because you work in a restaurant, you need to wear your clothes, or as a hostess or a host in a fair, and then you share also this clothes. So why we are not able to share our clothes in normal life?
Yeah, that will be super interesting. Yeah.
I really want to ask the industry to investigate and to collaborate more the fashion industry with the corporate fashion industry, because they can learn so much from each other. So I went to the fashion academy. After a few years, I made the step over to the corporate fashion industry, and I felt myself so much comfortable because you only make what you have to make, what they order to you. You do this fittings. You can see if this fittings is in the baseline and the normal baseline of sizes. And if you have a special, you make a special. So why we cannot adopt this for the consumers? And I think that you can have a better overview, a connection also with your clients or your customers. So yeah, I think that we can look into that together as well.
I agree.
The key in that development is, can we create a kind of service that gives the consumer the feeling that they are approached as an individual? Because that's one of the basic needs that we seem to have, is that we want to be unique individuals. And clothing is part of creating this unique personality. So the question is, are we able to create a service that aligns with that feeling? So that's the difference also with corporate clothing. They're all the same, etc., because the corporate is the unique identity, but for the individual consumer, it's the person himself or herself.
Yeah, but look in the streets now, Jan. People are only wearing a jeans, a t-shirt, a sweatshirt. They are all wearing the same clothes. So we did for 7 years for Fashion Revolution. Every April, we made a photo shoot to ask the consumers, we can look into your label. Do you know where your clothes come from? And I did not recognize anymore from what country they came from. When I was a little child, I could really see if someone came from Italy, Spain, or Japan or something. But we are looking the same. So we are looking corporate at the moment.
Yeah, but that's true. But the individual still has the feeling that he or she is more or less unique. And of course, there is a lot of similarity in what we are wearing. And also fashion is changing over time. But the question is not really what they have, but the question is, do they have what they want? And do they use what they gain from the service provider? So the service provider, that's the key question in this whole discussion, I would say. How can a fashion retailer or whatever become a service provider who knows its clients, who knows what we want, who knows the individual capacities, etc. And that's a huge challenge for the whole fashion industry. And I think that they will have to change, because to bring a little bit of different part in the discussion, what we saw in the last half year during the COVID-19 crisis is that the whole fashion industry collapsed because the retail fell down, and it all connected back to, let's say, the producers in India, Bangladesh, etc., because they canceled all the orders from the retail were canceled. They didn't pay anymore. So in the end, the real casualties, economical casualties, were in let's say India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, etc. And there was no resilience in the whole fashion industry to, well, stand forward in such a crisis situation. There's a lack of resilience, and then you can start reasoning, why is there a lack of resilience? And for me, that is because there is no diversity in business models. There's only one business model, that is sell as much as possible in the shortest possible time. And that makes the whole fashion industry very, well, crisis adaptive. So the whole fashion industry goes down because almost no one has another business model. And as you said in the beginning, some of the smaller companies, the libraries, etc., they survived because they kept their business, and they have a new business model. And that's where the whole industry should look for. And then the perspective of 2030, do not have ownership anymore, but be a user or whatever you want to call it, adopt your clothing. That is one of the possibilities to create more resilience in the whole fashion industry.
Like I can see within, especially the flatback couture with Jeffrey, is that fashion designers or producers will have a more educative, informative role where you build relationships rather than person to person rather than product to consumer. We talked about fashion as a service. Pepijn, do you have any input on how you see this developing towards 2030?
Well, before we go into that, I was curious on Jeffrey's philosophy about adapting and how to connect let's say, the consumer and designer, because I think that's what Roosmarie and Douwe are saying, is people want their own identity. But the problem currently is, with all due respect, these big corporates, they deliver to London, they deliver to New York, they deliver to Madrid. It's all the same clothes, indeed. Because H&M and all different kind of big companies are delivering the same clothes. So that's why we look the same. The whole gentrification within big cities is massive, and indeed it's very poor that we're just using the same clothes. So at the beginning, Jeffrey told about also connecting. I think that's very smart because we're not emotional connected to our products anymore. So before I answer that question, Sebastian, sorry, I was really curious about Jeffrey's philosophy on that in relation to the, I have to pronounce it correctly, the one we're just mentioning. It's really hard. The flat couture. I'm so good in my French. Couture. Because I think some parts are there, you're answering in that philosophy what we're just discussing. So if you would elaborate on that, that would be great.
So the question is like what the philosophy was behind flatback couture in the, So
and how do you see that as people like me? I'm just a normal guy, wanting to develop my clothes, and how do you see that working in the near future?
Yeah, well, the rough idea was to make the consumer part of the making process, like basically the production process. So you will order your jeans, let's say, and you will get a flatback sent home, and the jeans will be sent to you in separate parts with an instruction manual how to put the jeans together. The idea behind that is that when you put it together, you'll probably or most likely have a more emotional connection to the garment because you had to do actual work before you could wear it, in the hope that you won't get rid of it that quickly, like we do now, because we can buy it for €5, which is weird. And on the other hand, I mean, if you don't know how to operate a sewing machine or make it yourself, it is also very interesting for the local to local market, because I could go to the seamstress or the clothing maker next door, and I could hand it over to this person, and he or she could make it for me. So in a way, that's like, for me, it was to kind of make the whole production process transparent. I mean, Roosmarie is also part of Fashion Revolution. They always do this really nice campaign where they put on a shirt reverse with the tag showing to the picture, saying, and then asking who made my clothes. I think in this way you can kind of go around this whole bit, because it's either you that made the clothes or it's the seamstress or clothing maker next door.
And how did you identify that emotional connection? How big is that? I mean, because I think this is great. So what impact would that have on the product itself or on our closet?
Well, I think the impact, that's what I said before. I think that people will not get rid of it really quickly, because it's like the first time I ever put a piece of clothing together, I was like, oh my God, it's so much work. I really didn't know this. And it's like, it takes a lot of effort to make something look really beautiful. So I think like putting that effort in there and like, like craftsmanship is really, triggering emotions, because it's like the thing, like I've made a jacket 4 years ago. It was my first jacket ever. And I just can't get rid of it because I made it and it's mine and I love to wear it.
I want to give a personal anecdote in here as well, which may also link back to Douwe saying we need to identify uniquely as a character with our fashion. Is that I once bought a raw denim, and having pants that really stain towards how you live your life, and having your cell phone visibly shown in the denim, I think with the flatback couture, this transition where fashion, what fashion does, and also alterations that you as yourself in your body have. Maybe you lose some weight and you will be able to adjust your favorite pants to your new size. I think this is a good component in this fashion as a service, where you're educated to make alterations to the things that uniquely are yours. So that's just a personal viewing point, and I think that could really help the service part in this
Yeah, I'm actually happy that you mentioned that, Sebastian, because it's something that I forgot to say. That was also part of the philosophy behind it, is that because you've put it together yourself, well, let's say that you've put it together yourself, when it breaks, you probably also know how to fix it, or indeed alter it when you need to give it a little, like an extra centimeter on the side, or getting rid of a centimeter on the side. So yeah, thanks for mentioning that.
But I'm also curious to Jessica about, because you are changing plastic into other materials, and you did also together with Jeffrey this project on shoes. But how you look your future? Because I'm wondering.
Yeah, plastic is it's a nice material, but also a really bad material. It really depends on what you use the material for. That's what I'm thinking. If you just use the material and directly throw it away, then it's definitely not a good material. But that's also like how you think about materials directly. If you or when it's paper and you use and you throw it away directly, then it's also not really a good way of thinking or using materials. And with plastic, yeah, it's really hard, because when it's in the nature, it's definitely not gonna, it's always stay there, and that's really hard with this material. So we really have to try to just recycle it by ourselves in the industry. And what I'm doing is like working together with the industry to see what we can do with all this material. And of course we can say we don't have to use plastic anymore, we have to throw it away, burn it, and then it's gone. But I think it's also really important to look what kind of materials we have and what can we do with it, because a lot of products are from plastic and it's really hard to make it in another material. So I really look at or like what material we have, or what kind of way we can make some new materials from it, or products to really use the material that we already have. And like the way of working, it starts, I think, for 3 years ago when I was graduated, and I really wanted to make my own material. So I want to never buy my own material anymore. I always want to make my own material again. So recycling everything, and that's how it starts actually. And now I think it's really interesting to look together with the industry or other designers like Jeffrey to see what kind of materials we have and what kind of products we can make, and also like how you have to design this product. So really, like if you use different materials, that you can really take all these parts like lost from each other, that you can still recycle them. That's for me really important.
I have a question I would like to ask you as well, is that plastic, of course, lasts time and time and time again. Could you also think that can be, how do you say it, a component in having this philosophy of having something for your whole life? Like, because the plastic lasts this long, if you were able to recycle it within the same product, is that something that you could envision?
You mean that like what you design is something that you use for all the time of your life? Yeah, that's something that that's really important for me. Like the products that I design is something that you put it on your wall or something. So like art, and that's really something that you're proud of it. You don't really use it, of course, so it's not really necessary. But it's something that you're really proud of it, and you have it for your whole life. And if you don't like it anymore, then you just give it to someone else that you know that someone really likes as well. So yeah, for me that's really important, that if you design a product again, then it's not going throw away again, because then it's like turning around already. No, I don't like this idea. Yeah.
Sorry to be a material nerd, Sebastian, but also plastic, every time it gets recycled, it pollutes. The ocean is full of microbeads because the clothes we are wearing, we are putting in our washing machine, and depending on the temperature, it will loosen a little plastics. Yeah. And maybe indirectly, it will go in our food and create cancer or what else. So if we focus on recycling, we should really identify which materials we can recycle endlessly, low on energy and low on polluting. And what I've been reading about it, plastic is not the solution. Plastic is a beautiful material when it's going to be stored somewhere, maybe in a building, where it cannot be in contact with water. And recycling is also not possible to recycle endlessly, because the combination of the different moleculen, sorry, it's Sunday, will eventually be unrecyclable at the long end, because the strains will change in the long end. So I love the idea of constant recycling, but we really have to identify which materials we can really use for that without polluting or using a lot of energy.
Yeah, I agree totally, because a lot of PET bottles are used now as sustainable or circular in the fashion industry. And I mention always, don't use this kind of products in your product. So I understand that we want to go from textile to textile to clean up what we already have left. Because also during COVID, 1.5 million of kilograms of textiles were stored in the north of Amsterdam. Many pictures were around on the internet about it. And yes, if we can look into textile for textile, but then I hear many times, yes, and then we add some PET bottles. And I think, why you don't add natural materials like linen or hemp or whatever, natural materials, and if you can recycle that, add again natural materials. I know that also natural materials is a thing, because cotton has a very bad image nowadays. But then I say, yeah, but look where the cotton comes from. When you grow cotton in Uzbekistan, for example, and the ground is not made originally to grow cotton over there, yes, then you have to use pesticides, a lot of water. But I went as a cotton manager for Fairtrade to many areas in the world where the cotton was growing already for 4,000 years. So why for 4,000 years it was never a problem, and nowadays it's a problem? And the problem is because they use pesticides. There's the workers who are hopping from harvest to harvest, who are unpaid, not well, who are unpaid or are not paid well, or they breathe these pesticides. They use the water you normally have to use for the fishery or for normal daily life. And if you had like the Aral Lake, it's for 20 years now a big example that is empty because of the cotton industry in that area. Yes, if we use in the wrong way that kind of precious things, yes, then we do something wrong, and we have to learn from that and immediately to stop to use it wrongly.
I think in that combination and the philosophy of Jeffrey about adopting, if every garment has a deposit in there or a minimal price that the producer will take it back, that will sort out all these solutions, because then you know where the plastics are that are made of combined materials. Then you will know what's in the garment and how you can maybe reuse it cradle to cradle. So I think the adopting and maybe adding the deposit where producers will always take it back guarantee, that will really change the industry, in my opinion. Also, what Douwe was mentioning, that there's only currently one business model which is not resilient. They have to think of different business models, and in my opinion, this will be one where the producer will always take it back. So there will already be a shortener lifespan or need of throwing it away, because you can always bring it back to the one that made it and the producer know what's in it and how it's made as well.
With the risk of discussing what is happening now instead of what will happen in 2030, what you see now in the existing business model, every sales moment is also a moment of selling away responsibility. So the producer sells it to the retailer, and so at that moment the retailer becomes responsible. The retailer sells it to us, consumers. So at that moment, the consumer becomes responsible, and the consumer in the end doesn't know what that responsibility is or should be. Now, in the 2030 model, we should think far more about full producer responsibility. So it's the more, or in another way of saying, full professional responsibility. Because we cannot expect that every individual on this world will be able to see all the responsibilities that are needed for every piece of clothing. You need to go a step back, and it's the professional who knows what the clothing is, who knows which materials are used, who knows what can be done with it in reuse or remanufacturing or recycling or whatever. So the full professional responsibility should be somewhere in the system in 2030. Nowadays we are discussing in the Netherlands and Europe extended producer responsibility. Yeah, that's great. So then we get systems that the producers need to pay also for the recycling and waste management, but that's not the next step of thinking. The next step of thinking should be full producer responsibility. How do they take responsibility for every product that is being made, and how can they facilitate the customer, the user, to be able to, well, help them to have that responsibility. But I should say in 2030, one of the key issues should be full professional responsibility.
It's interesting that you're mentioning that, because at the end of my newspaper item, I'm also talking about a passport that goes with each product. Do you think that this could be a way of handing over that information, so that if I buy a wardrobe, for example, somewhere, that through that passport I know what materials were used to make it and how to recycle it?
Well, I'm always a little bit critical about that kind of information, because I think that people will not, individuals, in the end, individual consumers or customers will not use too much of that kind of information. Because it's on the one side, it's depressing to have all the information on all the products that you have around yourself. And it's so diverse that I probably, as an individual, would not be able to, well, to cope with it. Because then this jacket is something else than my shirt, and then my t-shirt, and then, oh, even my socks, my God. You get so much information that, well, when you get this kind of movement, I don't know. So it's good to have product information. It is good to have a product passport, but realize yourself that's information that should be used professionally, I would say.
Because I think, go Roos.
No, saying that, Douwe, I remember that 1 year ago, OCA, Organic Coalition Organization with CNA Foundation, they did a test with Taylor Lux from Germany, where they put a membrane, you say this in English like that, a membrane, into the fibers. And you can put all the data in these fibers. And I'm always a little bit skeptic on the other end. I think, yes, could be wonderful, because the professionals, when you say the professionals has to take the responsibility. So I can imagine that when professionals put this membrane into fibers, you spin, you weave, you knit, you make a garment, and the information stays there. And then through data, you can see where you can recycle it at the end after, but the quality has to be, because it's expensive. So I hope that because of to do that, the quality goes much higher of the cloth. I wonder how you think about this kind of technology innovation to put at the end the responsibility in 2030.
Well, I love innovations, but there are different kinds of innovations. And this is a technical innovation, which is great. And there were even discussions whether we could have a kind of biological DNA connected to like the natural materials. So they would be able to be recognized in the end of the whole process again by, let's say, the recyclers. Which is great, but as long as the system innovation doesn't appear, so the new relation between producer in the broader sense, from farmer to factory to retailer, and the relation with the customer in the end, being an adopter or a buyer. That is the real innovation that is needed, because that will create the conditions for change. And then the professionals will take more responsibility for the products. They will make products that last longer because they have a market where they can keep it going around. Because whatever you do in that new market is to create products that have a high value, but keep the value as high as possible even during use. So whether it's used by me or by Pepijn or Jeffrey, whatever, in all phases of use, there is a high revenue. And that is, of course, always the problem. At the moment the product is in the market, there is a start of a kind of what we call entropy. It breaks down, more or less. The moment you use your trouser the first time, it already is starting to degrade. And how can we address this degradation? Well, you can address it on different ways. You can address it in a technical way, use materials that do not degrade that easily. And you can use it in a business model way. I need the jeans without any holes. But there are generations later on, younger generation that want jeans with holes. So then it keeps the value, but in a different piece of the market. And that diversity, that let's say game, needs to be developed, and that's a systems innovation, and that's the real interesting part of the change.
Partly, I agree, Douwe, but on the professional, that the professional has to be the one responsible in educating the consumer. That's how I distillate it, or be responsible for the materials and usage. I don't agree. I think there are a lot of consumers currently just not using their products correctly, which is also a very negative impact, and that their products are breaking down, or they're standing still or whatever. I do think what Jeffrey is saying about adopters and producers, they take their own roles in this process and share responsibility. I really like that it's a shared responsibility. I think when you buy a product, you're also responsible for using it correctly. You're responsible for bringing it back, and you're responsible, if you're not using it, maybe to find another user. If we only say the professionals are responsible for that, people are just, with too much money, are still going to buy stuff, not use it correctly, and going to have valuable resources that can be used somewhere else on the planet Earth for somebody else who doesn't have that resources. So I would like to, be a promoter of shared responsibility, that consumers are responsible of correct usage. And yes, I do agree, a passport, and a lot of people still don't know how to wash their garments, what kind of materials are on there. They don't read the label, so they're washed incorrectly. But when I think you get that emotional connection where you are responsible for your clothes. I do think that really is the key here. And then the revenue model or the business model can be a hybrid model. We'll figure it out in the future. But only the responsibility at the professionals, I think then we have a problem in 2030. Because still people throw stuff in nature.
Well, I agree on that part, though I, of course, have all kind of remarks on it. But I would say yes, but it's on the professional who creates the new business model to fill in the conditions which make the consumer use the stuff in the right way and take the responsibility they can take.
I think we really should do a joint collaboration on the user and the professional. There are a lot of, I was the incubation manager at Yes Delft. I've seen thousands of technical ideas. They never talk to an end user. So I do think what Jeffrey's saying, look at the end and try to re-engineer it back. That's pretty smart. Yeah. A lot of professional people, they don't even know their own user. They don't even don't know their own customer. And they say, oh, this is the solution. You buy it. You use how I eventually designed it. So I do think the combination of that.
Yeah, I spoke lately with a collector, a clothing collector, and the man who talked to me, he said, we know immediately when consumers liked a new trend or not, because we can see it in our collected clothes, because suddenly they had thousands of flare pants. So the people who bought it and don't want to wear it anymore because not the trend, they discard it. And there you can see that the whole supply chain has to talk with each other, because also we can learn so much from each other, also the collectors. In the Dutch plan of circularity, I don't think that the collectors were, they listened to them to make up the circular textile plan. And that's a pity. It's a missed opportunity also to know what consumers really want. Like you say, does a consumer really want this stuff? And then design for circularity design thinking, it's already entered in this field 10, 15 years. And we have to adapt to that more and more because the fast fashion industry is not doing it. Only I think the smaller designers, but the smaller designers, they are small and they don't get the profit out of it.
Maybe we can go to Jeffrey with a question related to this all. Jeffrey, you talk about 2013 having regulation that makes the sales model into an adaptive model. Why do you think there is a need of regulation?
I just thought it was really interesting to play with the idea that that's a new rule that we just all have to follow. I mean, I think we're always scared of change and we don't want to have too many strict rules. But I think that this year, for example, was a really good example for me because at the start of this year, COVID-19 happened and then we got some rules and we had to stick to it. And everyone started listening to what was asked from them. And I think that, like, well, maybe not everyone, but it was, I do think that it's a really, I don't know, also on a governmental level, I think there should be more awareness of this and there should be more strict rules when it comes to, producing new products.
There's a phenomena that I'm thinking about at this moment in this discussion now. We already know for about 10-15 years that in the Netherlands and Western economies, about 8% of the consumers is willing to take sustainability in account when they buy something or in their lifestyle, which is 8%, which means 92% is not taking sustainability in account. So we can do a lot of communication and awareness building towards the consumer to get more people being aware of sustainability issues. And then we build it from 8% to 10%, which is huge. Then we already have a quarter or 1/5 result, but we are still on the 10%. And the other 90% is not aware, is not willing to be aware, is not really acting on it. And we know from research that this other 90% is not completely unaware. That group is about 60-70% of it is willing to have guilt-free consumption. They would like to have guilt-free consumption, which is a huge group. But that means that they will not take an individual responsibility for guilt-free consumption, but think that the provider, whether it's the retail or whatever, should take that responsibility and take care that the products are, well, guilt-free. And this is a phenomena that you see now in supermarkets coming, at least in the Netherlands, more or less. So they want to have good chicken meat instead of bad chicken meat, which is growing. But you do not see it yet too much in the fashion industry. A very, very little bit. H&M and other big retailers have in their collection maybe 5 or 10 sustainable things. But that's, well, on the sideline. And we have to get into the main line of the companies. And these are thoughts that are going through my head on the question whether the consumer can take a responsibility role in this whole process, or are we going to change the whole process that the consumer gets what he or she wants?
Yeah, it's interesting that you're mentioning that. It's also maybe a good thing to round up the conversation with, because I already see that we've been talking for an hour. One of the conclusions that I drew out of this article that I wrote is that the right choice shouldn't be a choice, and it should just be there for us to pick up off the shelf, and we shouldn't be worried about it being wrong. It should just be right. Well, this was already a 1 hour chat about my collection, The New Standard. I'm super happy that you wanted to join me in this talk. I also want to say thank you to Sebastian for being around to moderate this and listen to us, and Jessica to help out. And I want to mention to everyone that is watching that from now on you can go to the DDW'20, to the website of Dutch Design Week, and there is a live chat available on my personal page to keep talking about this subject. So feel free to go there. And yeah, I would still, Douwe, Jan, Roosmarie and Pepijn, thank you so much for your time again. And we'll talk soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
See
you.
you
It was
in
a pleasure.
2021.
Thank you.
And we'll see what happens in 2030.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.